Okay, let's switch keys here just to keep it interesting. Sometimes working in C for long periods of time just gets kind of boring. So let's go over to the key of D. So I'm in D major. So my 5/7 chord, I should say, is going to be A7, right? So let's do A7 in root position. That's what I've got here in the key of D. Mind the key signature. So I spelled it A-E-G-C. Okay, so now I know my two tendency tones. So let's find our leading tone first. In the key of D, C is my leading tone. So let's resolve that. So that has to go up. That's got to go up to a D. And then my chordal seventh, which is the seventh of this chord, is G, and that's got to go down. So you can think of this as the resolution here is the seventh goes up a step and the chordal seventh, sorry, let me try that again. The leading tone goes up a step, the chordal seventh goes down a step. Now, the word step in this case, what I mean is a step in key. So this is going to go, C is, technically this is a half step, C sharp to D, but if you want, you don't even have to think about that really. You can just say, this one's got to go up to the nearest possible note. So the next note up. This one has to go down by a step in key, we like to say. That means it may be a half step, it may be a whole step. As long as I'm staying in key, doesn't matter. I'm just going to go up to the next note and down to the next note. Anyway, so there are my two resolutions, my leading tone and my chordal seventh. Now let's see what I can do with the rest of this. For these two, let's follow kind of our path of least resistance model here. So our E, let's just drop that down to a D, because that's very close. And our A, we want to keep this in root position for this example. So let's take this A down to a D, which is what it has to be in root position, right? Because it's a D major chord. Okay, so what did I do here? My resolution all works. My tendency tones work. I've got a small path there. I've got root notes in the bass. I don't have any big parallels or anything like that. But what's wrong with this? Let's spell our D chord. We have a D, we have a D, we have an F sharp, and we have a D. We have three Ds. And then we have a third, and we have no fifth. So kind of no matter how you spell your 5/7 chord here, you're going to end up with this kind of a situation if you resolve everything correctly. So what do? Nothing. We just allow it because that's the way it goes. That's the best way for things to sound good. If you cheated and sent this F up to an A, that wouldn't sound very good because this resolution would be goofy. If you kept this on an A, it's not in root position anymore, so that wouldn't really work very well. So when you're going from root position 5/7 to a root position tonic chord, you're going to end up with a tonic chord that's got a missing fifth. And that's okay. Remember that if we're going to leave off a note, the fifth is, it's an okay one to leave off. We can live without the fifth. The third is more problematic. Let's look at another way that this could happen. Well, let's just hear this really quick. Okay, there you go. It sounds like a nice resolution, right? You barely notice that it's got a missing fifth. Sounds good. Let's do it one other way, which is to spell our 5/7 chord a little weird. Okay, here's my 5/7 chord. Now, in root position. Now, what did I do? Remember, it's an A7 chord. Same chord as this, just spelled a little bit differently. So what I did is, or not spelled differently, but arranged a little bit differently. What I did here is I have A in the bass, so it's an A7 chord. That's totally okay. So it's still root position. So the next note would be C, A, C, E. I left off the E and then went to my 7th. So again, I've left off the 5th, but this time I left the 5th off in the 5-7 chord. So you'll notice this. We haven't seen this before, but this means that the bass and the tenor are on the same note, and that's okay. You can do that. It's not a voice crossing if they're on the same note. So this is allowed. So I left off the 5th in my 5-7 chord, but what does that do for my resolution? The resolution in the treble clef is going to be the same. So let's fill that in. So my leading tone goes up to tonic. My chordal 7th goes down to that 3rd. I can leave my tenor voice on the A and drop my bass voice down to the D. So now I have a full triad spelled nicely and arranged nicely, but I've left off the 5th here in order to make it resolve correctly. So 2 different ways you can do it. Let's hear this one. So this chord sounds a little thinner, right? Let's hear all of them back to back. Right, you know, in this context, it's barely hard, or you can barely tell the difference. Let's slow it down. Okay, a little bit slower. See if we can hear the difference. It's pretty minuscule. You know, it's pretty tiny. But that is some of the funky things you have to do if you want your resolutions to work correctly, which you do in a 5-7-1 situation in SATB voicing. Okay, now let's look at some of the inversions. And let's do that in a new video.